All right, it's 4:02, so I think we'll just get rolling. Um, yeah, I'm pumped for today's clinic. Thank you all for being here. I love getting to do this. We did our first one last year. I think we're probably going to make this an annual thing. We modify it a little bit each time, but going to be talking a lot of Overwatch today, a little bit of collegiate esports as well. To kick things off, I just want to quickly talk a little bit about Northwestern College and our program. There were a few questions during registration that made me think I should probably cover a bit of this, as some of you are curious about what esports looks like at the collegiate level. So I'm going to walk you briefly through our program, kind of who we are, so you know a bit about where all this information is coming from. So Northwestern College, we are located in Orange City, Iowa, in the northwest corner of the state. We are a varsity esports program under the athletic department. We've been around, this is our fourth year, I believe, as a program. There are about 600 to 650 or so varsity esports programs in the US at this point, and that number continues to grow. So I always like to talk about our purpose statement, kind of our culture and core values, because that is what will be the differentiator between those 600 programs. Most of us in that number, right? We have an arena like you see behind me. We have practices, we have scholarships, we compete, we do all those things that varsity teams do. But every program has its own culture. Every program has its own goals and mission and community that they're trying to build. So that's what we talk a little bit about, because it's a core piece of who we are and what makes us different from other teams. So our purpose as a program, Northwestern is a pretty solid academic institution. And so we're very focused on helping our players succeed academically, helping them have a space where they can build authentic relationships, deep community, because we think that's just a very important component of their college experience. We want to be a good place where students can connect, and we want to help them grow personally, professionally, and competitively. So that's who we are. That is our desire. Through our standards or our core values, we believe these are the values that are not just key to growing and becoming a great esports competitor or a great Overwatch player, but to building great teams and building great leaders who can succeed post college after leaving Northwestern. So these are the values, these are the things we are pushing towards. Getting into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of what we are, I'm going to skip past the player testimonials for some of our graduated seniors. Like I said, we're a varsity sport under athletics. We award scholarships to all players. We have varsity and JV teams in these three titles, Smash Bros being our newest coming this fall. A little bit of my competitive philosophy. We believe that strong teams beat and overturn great players. So we're very focused on developing trust, communication, and synergy. We're very focused on player development, helping students grow in a goal-driven growth process, developing all four components of skill within esports, not just game mechanics, but knowledge, tactics, and strategy. A little bit about our facility that you see behind me here. So we have 18 PCs right now. We're hoping to add a few more, located in the center of our campus in our classroom building. Partnered with HyperX as our official peripheral partner. It's been fun to build a relationship with them and provide a space for our students. This is one of the biggest pieces I wanted to talk about a bit, is the commitment. What does it look like to be a varsity esports competitor? This also will be different at every institution. Not every institution operates in the same way, but at Northwestern, during our competitive season, we practice 4 to 5 days a week. You'll have games once or twice a week. Practice varies in length from could be as short as 1 hour to as long as 2.5 hours, depending on the day and what we're doing in practice that day, whether it's scrimmages, VOD reviews, individual training. We do physical training as well. Our on-campus athletic department trainers have designed workouts, and they train our teams. We've found, there's a lot of research and science that shows the benefit to esports competitors of having physical health and physical training. There's a lot of mental acuity, cognitive function benefits. Our team is really, there was some skepticism when we talked about adding this a year and a half ago. But kudos to them. They tried it on and bought in, and it's really paid off. They've really enjoyed it, and we've seen some great benefit from it. So in addition to that, year-round, students meet with me regularly. We have team meetings on a regular basis, and students always have Sundays off. So that's what it looks like to be on one of our varsity teams in the meat of the season. Another varsity component, we travel to in-person tournaments. Most of regular seasons for most collegiate programs happen online. but we do travel to a couple in-person tournaments a year. Those are always great highlight experiences for our players and teams. That's a little bit about us. This is just links to some other things. And then we are always recruiting and building up our program. So if you're interested in being in one of these sweet photos in a couple years from now or next year, would love to have you look more into us and reach out. But just wanted to give you a quick collegiate esports overview. I'm going to switch over to the actual clinic presentation here and we will get going. All right. All right, so what are we gonna be covering today? Already talked a little about Northwestern College esports. To kind of prep the actual clinic itself, we're gonna cover quite a few things. I kind of laid out the 4 bullets in the clinic advertisement of kind of the 4 main topics we're gonna talk about. This clinic is in some sense a accumulation of the last 3.5 years, 3.5 to 4 years of what we have done as an Overwatch team and an esports program to develop a good system to train and build our players and our teams. There's going to be a lot of information we cover here today. More probably than you'll be able to utilize immediately, right? So I encourage you to take notes, not constantly necessarily, but if there's something that really jumps out to you that makes you go, I should focus on that, or, oh, my team should really talk about this, I would encourage you to jot that down. We are recording the clinic, so hopefully you'll be able to reference this back as well if you need. But we're going to cover a lot. We're going to go through quite a few concepts. So if you don't grasp it all at once, that's okay. Don't try to do all of this at once after today. I know for the Iowa students and teams in particular, you guys are about halfway through your season or maybe even just a little over. You might be looking, all right, what's the one concept we can implement for heading into playoffs? And you might be looking at the rest of this of building to next year, right? And that's where we've been. It's taken us a few years to really build on these concepts to get to where we are today. So with that, what are we talking about? We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what I think is the primary tool for effective and efficient practice. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about how should I as an individual pick heroes? How should we build team comps? We'll spend a good chunk of time on the fundamentals of Overwatch, how to win, how to understand and approach the game from a strategic and effective method. And then we'll spend another chunk of time on questions that many of you submitted during registration, and then some that you guys will toss in during the actual clinic here. So if you have questions as we go, please feel free to throw those in the chat. I don't know if we'll get to all of them during the clinic or not, but if we don't, hopefully we can get to some of them at the end or even sending out answers afterwards. All right. Moving forward then, the last thing I'll cover before we jump into the actual content, why am I someone worth listening to? What's my kind of Overwatch credentials? I've been coaching and playing Overwatch for about 4 years now. In that time, when I played quite a bit more, I peaked in top 500 DPS, played in a few tournaments, second place, unfortunately, a few times, never quite crowned the top. Left that to coaching with my teams, but I've worked with players from every rank from bronze up to GM and above. I have coached multiple teams in and outside of collegiate. I think the biggest climb that I've had the privilege to coach is a player going from plat to GM. That was fun to work him through that journey. So I have a good amount of experience and I love getting to coach. It's a great passion of mine. I love equipping students and helping you guys kind of find that next level as individuals and as teams. One quick note about some of the material we'll cover today. Primarily, I'm speaking into the context of you as high school players and high school teams, where I'm assuming there's a variety in your team of ranks and of skills and of experience with Overwatch. Some of you who are more advanced, there'll be some things here that are great for you, some that are beginners, there'll be some stuff that's over your head. That's okay. It's a broad clinic. Even at the collegiate level, rarely are you seeing teams of, 6 GMs, 6 diamonds, 6 golds. There's a lot of variation, even in collegiate level. So that's kind of where we're headed. Let's hop into the first thing, which is effective practice. For me, goal setting is the number one thing that helps drive effective practice. And it's always fascinating to me when I work with players and teams and we have freshmen come to join our program, how rarely this is something that's proactively thought about. So The honestly number one tool is set goals. Set goals that are very clear about what am I trying to accomplish today in practice, whether it's an individual or whether it's you as a team setting a goal for what you want to be working on. When should you set goals? Before you even boot up the game, you should know this is our goal for today. This is what we're trying to accomplish and get in. You should only have one or two at most at a time you're focused on. If you try to, create a list of 10 goals and do it all at once, you won't be able to practice and focus effectively. So have narrow goals, work them one at a time. You can make a list of 10, just don't work on them all at once. Focus one or two, the most important. Give it a couple days, couple games, couple weeks, however long it might take. Write them down, have them written down. It's very important, I think, to get those thoughts out of your head and either on paper or just in a Word document or a Google Doc, just somewhere where you can articulate it. As you think about the goals, this idea, right, of winners do and losers don't, that language is primarily around the idea of when you make goals, write them in the context of doing things, not, okay, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't waste my shield, don't waste my cooldown, don't waste my ultimate. Write goals in the proactive. All right, hey, I want to use cover, right? Use good cover, save and manage my shield health well, right? Things like that. Because if you write goals in a proactive manner where it's all right, my goal is to do the correct thing or do the best thing, well, then that will automatically replace whatever poor or inferior habit and practice you were doing before. But if you just have don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, well, what are you supposed to do? So try to be proactive in the language you use as you make goals. So it's a simple concept, but it's one that takes intentionality. Do it as individuals, do it as teams. Really hitting hard on this. This just doubles down on the idea of goals. The biggest difference between practice and play is that practice is focused and it is purposeful. And in order to have focus and purpose, that's where the goals come in. The goals give you focus and purpose. If you're not setting goals, if you don't have focus and purpose in your practice, then you're not practicing. You're just playing. And teams and players that play, you will not improve nearly as quickly as if you actually practice. Practice takes work, it takes intentionality, but the growth, the return on the investment is worth the effort. There's a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment from growing in skill. So that's a bit of kind of that first section there. Getting into some of the how to select heroes, how to build team comps. We had a couple questions that I put up on the screen here that were during registration. I was very happy to see these questions because they tie right into the clinic. The first is obviously pretty individual, but I really love this second one as well. This idea of, hey, is it better to have the best characters in the game to play the 5 meta heroes, so to say, right? Or does it make more sense for our team to, you know, play the heroes that the 5 players we have are comfortable at and confident on? And this is where some of that comes to this clinic being specific and targeted to high school teams, rather than, Overwatch League or top of collegiate or semi-pro teams. And so we'll get into some of these answers here in a minute, but a little bit of a spoiler, comfort picks are going to be the way to go. So speaking to the individual, right, what hero should I decide to play? Who should I practice? Don't paint the rainbow with your career profile, right? You don't want to have 10 different heroes with 3 different hours on each one, or 1 to 3 hours. If you're focused on growth and improvement and your goal is to improve as a player, focus on one role and play 2 to 3 heroes, maybe 4, 5 at the most, as far as you're really focused on them, and really grow in comfort and confidence in those heroes. That is, if your main goal is improvement, that is the most effective way to do it. Obviously, if you're just playing more casually, less worried about that, go ahead, mix it up, that's fine. But from the context of maximizing your time and improvement, building competence and comfort, because you want to get away from having to think about, okay, how do I play this hero in your games, to, all right, what's the next best decision I can make? What position should I be taking? What's the next fight going to look like? You want your hero mechanics, decision making, to become automatic, which is why narrowing down the number of heroes you play and the roles that you play will be very helpful. Getting into the second question, right? Team comps. What do we play as a team? Play to your strengths. In my mind, comfort picks trump the meta outside of everything other than the highest levels of play. Um, for example, we last season we played a lot of ball and sigma comps, these compositions that are very divey, and we really, from a strategic standpoint, I really wished we had a tracer player. Tracer would have fit really well in that composition. She was a strong meta hero, but we did not have in our roster of players a strong tracer player. But we did have a player who was extremely good at Genji. And Genji at that time, if any of you have been playing the game for a little while, was not good. He was not strong. He was not considered to be meta. But we had a player who was really good at Genji. We didn't have anyone who was good at Tracer, so we played a lot of Genji, and it was extremely effective. We experienced a lot of success playing to our own strengths rather than playing to what was considered meta. So what I always do at the beginning of every season for our teams is I take, our roster of players, I take their 2 to 4 comfort picks, and that is the 20 to 24 heroes that I am working with as I build team compositions. The other 12 to 15 heroes that are on the Overwatch 2 roster, they're just not even in my consideration. Or if we do have a hero that we really want to play, we'll take that hero to a player and say, hey, this needs to become one of your comfort picks. Practice it, learn it. We'll help you go through it. But we're not going to just pull it out at random in a match because it's just not worth it to give up that comfort and that smoothness of play and decision making just to play a meta hero. So that's my advice, especially again to high school teams, that meta is not the most important thing for you, and we'll get into some other things that will play a much greater impact in how you play and compete. The other thing, as you have that pool of 20 heroes, it's like, all right, now how do we pick from these 20? Synergy. Ideally, try to build groups of 5 heroes that have synergy. And what I mean by that is, heroes that enhance one another's strengths, that cover for one another's weaknesses. If you're not sure what heroes do that, a few Google searches, some YouTube guides, discussions with your teams, you should get a pretty good idea of how that works. One obvious example, or easy example, I should say, Reinhardt, Lucio, right? 2 heroes that are close range that very much benefit from one another's strengths, and that gets into, right, whose synergy matters most. Typically, when you're looking to build synergies, you would like your tanks and your supports to have good synergy because they rely on one another quite a bit. Your tank is rather reliant on your support, often, not always. Second to that, your DPS and your support, but the tank and support being synergistic is most important. Lucio Ryan being a good example, but let's say you want to play Winston on tank, you probably don't want to be playing Baptiste because you will have a hard time helping and healing your Winston from long distance, right? Playing something like Ana would be a lot better to help your monkey at long distance, or Moira or Kiriko who can actually go in with your Winston, things like that. So have a discussion with your team around that. Be thinking about, all right, these are our heroes that we're good at as a team. How do we pair them up together? What are we looking for as far as synergy goes? All right, I'm going to keep chugging along here, but if you have questions pertaining to synergy, hero picking, goal setting, you can toss those in chat. Any questions that you have as we go, feel free to chuck those in there. We're going to talk a little bit about communication, getting into the second section of the clinic here. These first 2 sections are pretty short. Also, toss a 1 in the chat if you can actually hear me. I guess now I've been talking for 10 minutes. I assume people can hear me, but perfect. All right. Communication. This is an essential skill for every esports competitor and team. Nothing will cripple you faster than bad communication, either from a competitive standpoint or from a just team morale and relationship standpoint. So there's a few key do's and don'ts of communication. We'll get into that. Speaking of throwing things in the chat, toss me your answers here. What is the purpose of communication in esports? Why do we communicate? Why do we wear these headsets with microphones rather than just wearing headsets and listening to the in-game audio? Why do we talk to one another? What's the goal of that? What's the purpose? Give you a minute or two here. Okay, good. We've got some good stuff coming in here. Inform members of the current game state and coordinate, work together, better teamwork, convey information, work together. Yeah, lots of good stuff here, right? You're definitely on the right track. Good, good, good. Two main purposes of communication here. I'll have a few moments where we'll toss stuff in here, but two main purposes: building player confidence, building confidence within the team, and providing information that aids in decision making. These are the two purposes of communication. When a team is communicating well, it gives you the sense in game that you're on the same page, and it builds confidence and the ability to make courageous plays and work well together. And then obviously providing information that aids in decision making. So main two purposes. So with that, what does communication look like? What are the things we should be saying? Again, simple things, but it's really important here. Communicate relevant information, things that are useful at this time to your team, and encourage one another, right? There's a lot of Overwatch to many degrees is a game of confidence when it comes to team play. Decisive action is important. So offering up encouragements, just the fact that you're communicating at all will give your teammates confidence in the plays that they're making, that hey, I have my team's support. They're following up on what I'm trying to do. So then what does the communication don't, right? If these are the do's, what are the things that we shouldn't be saying? And essentially it's everything else, right? Anything that is not helpful or immediately relevant to the current moment in time. And those, I want to break those two things down: not helpful or immediately relevant. Things that are not helpful, right? Complaining about why you just died, or like reacting to your death, or harping on a bad play that one of your teammates just made. Chances are really good if your teammate just made a bad play, they probably know it and don't need you to tell them about it. And if they do, talk about it between the round, between the maps. And that gets to the immediately relevant piece, right? Sometimes when I watch teams and sit in and coach them, they'll get caught up in discussions mid-map, mid-match about the fight that just happened. Oh man, we should have done this instead. Hey, the next time we play this map, we should really do this. And that's important, but it's not important right now. That needs to wait until after the map, till after the match, to when we actually have time to think. What we need to be talking about right now is the next fight. What's coming up in the next 20, 30 seconds, right? Because Overwatch is incredibly fast paced, as you all know. There's not time for these lengthy discussions. There's a lot of good things that could be talked about, but there's a time and a place for those conversations, and it's not in the middle of a match. So again, these are simple concepts when it comes to communication. We spent a good chunk of our first year as a program really harping on communication, because esports requires a certain kind of communication that we just talked about. And that communication is not typically what you see and find in just gaming. In your online ranked games, your teammates are not communicating in effective ways, right? They're not always giving you good information. Sometimes they're saying nothing. A lot of the times they're giving you bad information, or just fluff, or complaining, or flaming, right? So this is against the grain. If you don't have a lot of team experience, this is a great skill to practice and build up, because it's incredibly important if you want to have any kind of success as a team competitively. All right, that kind of wraps up the first two sections. We're going to spend more time on this third section here, kind of the fundamentals of Overwatch. The core, I always subtitle this Coach Spilo's Overwatch Solved, because the core of this section I adopted from Coach Spilo. He is a professional Overwatch coach, recently coached for the London Spitfire in the Overwatch League. I love his philosophies and the things that he talks about. We implemented them into our program probably 2 years ago now, and we've had a lot of success with some of that. We've adjusted and changed a few things and expanded on some things, but if you're looking for other great coaching content, definitely check him out on YouTube. He's got some fantastic resources out there. So we're going to break down Overwatch and get into a few things here. At a nutshell, if you ask me to give a one sentence about how to win Overwatch, or what Overwatch is about, the name of the game is pressure. Is putting pressure on your opponents, the most amount of pressure you can, and minimizing the pressure that is on you and your team. And the reason for that, why is this the purpose? It's because Overwatch is a game of resources. So you want to maximize your pressure on your opponents to force out and burn and use up their resources faster than yours are used up, right? Resources being things like cooldowns, ultimates, your HP, your shield, things even like time or positioning, right? These are all resources that are available to you to create pressure and gain advantages. So in that vein, toss this in the chat for me. How can you, on your role, on the heroes that you play, create pressure? Whether you play Mercy or Reinhardt or Widowmaker, what are some of the ways that you, on your heroes, can create pressure? There's multiple facets to this. I'll be curious to see what you got. Off angle. Good. Dive into enemy team. Be somewhere advantageous and shoot them. Good. Be loud. Flank. As a DPS, get picks, poke heroes to low HP. Yep, do damage, hitting shots, damage boosting tanks, right? Enhancing your enhancing your teammates. Target heroes and create space. Good. Focus heroes. Kill them all. Yep. Getting kills is big pressure, right? Sigma blocking enemy damage. Yep. Damage mitigation. That's one of the neat things about Overwatch, right? Is it's not just about doing damage and getting kills, but stopping enemy damage, healing people, pocketing them for longer amounts of time. Yeah. Good. Good. You guys are on the right track here. Lots of ways to create pressure from a more macro standpoint or a fundamental standpoint. This is where kind of Coach Spilo's philosophy comes into place. These three things, what I would call the holy trinity of Overwatch: planning, timing, and positioning. In order to create the most amount of pressure we can, these are the three things that we want to be focused on doing. And these are in order of importance, planning being critically important. It's amazing to me how even high level teams that I'll work with are not consistent with planning. So if you want the biggest bang for your buck on upgrading your team, focus on planning. So we're going to unpack that first. We'll get into timing and positioning in a bit here. But planning, what do I mean by that? What does quality planning look like? Well, it might sound simple. And again, a lot of these concepts are simple. Overwatch is a complex game, no doubt, right? There's a ton going on. It's fast paced, but the fundamentals of the game are simple, but difficult to execute consistently because of the fast paced complexity. So planning, a complete plan before every fight, heading into every engagement, you would like to have a complete fight that, or a complete plan, excuse me, that consists of what are we doing? Where are we doing it? And when are we doing it? Three basic things. And you would be amazed if you recorded the communication of some of your games and matches with your scrim teams, how often these three things are not talked about and not understood heading into every single fight. It really is surprising to me especially when I worked with high level teams. It was surprising how often even the fundamentals are missing there. It's just not as obvious because other things are stronger. So quality plan, every fight, we want these three things. One just easy example of that being like, hey, we're gonna push around the choke and speed boost on the Orisa. 3, 2, 1, go, 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 right? Like, what are we doing? Speed boost around the choke onto the Orisa. Where? Well, the location is implied, right? On the Orisa. Gives you context. You don't have to be like, well, on the corner here by the clock. It's, it could be relative. It could be simple. And when? Well, right now, as I'm counting it down and calling it. So it's very simple, but again, it's the consistency of executing this every single fight. Um, let's get into this a little bit more, get some examples and details here. There's a few different ways that plans are created. And the first thing I want to talk about and unpack, because it's especially important. Not May, but May's great. It's just good for examples, I suppose. Default playstyle. Every composition, every set of heroes that you could come up with in the game has a default play style that they would like to play into, a way that they would like every fight more or less to unfold and go down. And so the idea that you want to figure out is, what is our composition's default play style, right? We've come up with our list of 20 heroes, our compositions. How do we play? What's just the basic idea here? So how do we figure out the default plan or the default play style? There's three things we want to be thinking about. We want to maximize the strengths of our heroes, minimize their weaknesses, and leverage their key strongest cooldowns. So we're going to use this set of 5 heroes as an example here. Thinking about, all right, what's the strengths of this composition? Well, we have Ryan, Cassidy, May, Baptiste, Lucio, a lot of short range to mid-range heroes, Bap Cassidy being mid-rangish, Lucio, May, Ryan being very much close range, right? So strengths, we'd like to lean in and maximize the strengths. The flip side of that, what are our weaknesses? Well, we're not great at long range, right? Like medium range is okay-ish, but close range is where we thrive. And mobility, right? Vertically, we don't have very much vertical mobility. We've got okay horizontal mobility with Lucio, which is great, but compared to other compositions we could play in Overwatch, this is not what I would call a mobile composition, right? So key cooldowns, right? This is, again, where you guys come in. What are the key cooldowns of this composition, right? What are the cooldowns between these 5 heroes that are the most important, the most powerful, the most impactful that we think would inform how we want to play? What is our default play style? There's obviously what, like 15 to 20 cooldowns across these 5 heroes. Speed, amp, lamp, and Maywall. Lamp, wall, grenade, Rhine pin, amp, Maywall, lamp, immortality. Yeah, lots of good ballparks here, right? Key cooldowns, lamp, wall, amp. Yeah, like I said, there's 15 to 20 cooldowns. If you had to order them in most impactful and the ones we really want to leverage, I would probably put speed at number 1. I would probably put Maywall at number 2. Those being the 2 that are really going to inform our default play style. Lamp being a very powerful and impactful cooldown, but it doesn't necessarily impact how we play. You could change Baptiste for an Ana, and we would probably still play relatively similarly. Same thing, you could swap out the Cassidy and it wouldn't change much. You could swap the May for a Reaper, and again, that wouldn't change a ton either, but the speed amp and the wall being particularly important, right? So our default play style with this composition, we will want to speed boost in, use wall to isolate a target or to cut off LOS or trap people in place, right? And force a brawl at close to mid-range. That is just our baseline default play style. With this composition, we would like every fight, if possible, to unfold in that way. Could you swap McCree and Genji for vertical and angles? Yeah, you totally could. We would probably still more or less look to maintain that same core play style, but it gives us a little more flexibility in different ways. So so that's the baseline, the play style. That's our basic plan. So if our Reinhardt is our shot caller and he's just going, hey, let's speed boost in 3, 2, 1, everyone should know in their head already what we're trying to do. Well, if we're trying to speed boost in and Maywall, I should have my Maywall available. I should have speed boost available, things like that. Ultimates. Let's talk about ultimates. Often this is where planning people, if they plan anything, they plan their ultimates, which is good. But often people misunderstand how ultimates impact the plans. If we have Blizzard or Window or Shatter, does that change the default play style? Does that change how we would like the fight from a default base level to go down? Let me know what you think in chat here. Does that change the default play style? See a lot of yeses, a couple no's maybe. It shouldn't because of how less common the abilities are. At least in this comp, it wouldn't. Yes and no. Yeah, so a bit of a mixed bag. Overall, I would argue that in the majority of situations, your having ultimates does not change the default play style or the general default plan of how compositions want to play. Because if we have Blizzard, do we want to yeet Blizzard in from 100 feet away and then speed boost in? Or do we want to speed boost, use May to isolate or use wall to isolate or trap, and throw a blizzard into our close to medium range brawl, right? Same thing with window. We'd like to use window so that we can close distance, so that we have extra healing and damage pressure from BAP for that same brawl engagement. If we have Ryan Shatter, we're going to do the same speed boosting in, right? In general, the basic idea of how the composition plays does not change. There is ways you can set up set plays like window fire strikes, which obviously a little less common in Overwatch 2. There are some compositions that you might change things a little bit more, but think too of a dive composition. Let's say you're playing Winston, Genji, Ana, Kiriko, Tracer, right? The default playstyle of a composition like that is to set up angles with your DPS and set up a dive onto isolated or squishy targets, right? Um, that's the default playstyle. If we have Nanoblade, we still want to set up angles with DPS, to have our monkey dive in to make space for the DPS, and to have our backline set up in safe positions. All of that we still want, except it makes it even stronger. It makes that one dive even stronger. So that's one thing. Often, I'll see teams like they just throw in Blizzard before doing any of the work to set up their engagement properly, or they'll chuck in the Genji with the Nanoblade by himself and it won't work out. The default playstyle always runs through the vein of most every fight. Ultimates just tend to make it even better, even stronger. All right, positioning based, last kind of plans you can create. Sometimes you'll create plans just based on positions around the map that you want to take control of or that you want to take away control of. That's another way that you can form plans, but that's the base concept of planning here. My recommendations to you for specifically your teams, what you would take away and how you would start working some planning. Primary things: figure out who's going to be calling the plans on your team. It can be one person. A lot of teams, right? You'll have someone who has a lot of, the most experience or game knowledge, and they kind of have risen to this position already. You can spread it out between multiple people. When people have ultimates, I like to structure our teams to where, hey, if you have your ultimate, you're responsible for calling the plan to play off of your ultimate because it's yours. You need to know how it works and you need to be able to set up the plan. So that's one thing to figure out. And two, identify your composition's default playstyle, right? Figure out the strengths, the weaknesses, how to leverage your strongest cooldowns. Try to get a basic idea. Talk about this outside of the game, like sit around a table for 5 minutes, figure this out so that everyone knows in their heads, okay, this is roughly what we're trying to do, how we're trying to play. 3, don't hyper focus on quality yet. It's much more important that everyone be on the same page and just that 5 people are committed to, with confidence, executing this plan, even if it's the worst plan in the world, is more important than not having a plan or having a really great plan that only one person understands and therefore only one person actually executes. So figure out who's calling, identify your comps, play styles. Don't worry about quality yet. You'll get there as you practice. Okay, we spent a lot of time on planning because it really is just such a key skill, such a high impact method of effective play. Timing, we got into this a little bit in talking about planning because they're very tied together, right? The what are we doing, where are we doing it, and then the when are we doing it. That's very integrated to timing. We'll unpack this a little bit further here. What I mean by timing is this: you want 5 people creating pressure at the same time, even if it's not the same thing or in the same place. A lot of teams, and we were guilty of this early on, this was a big game changer for us after our first year or so, is discovering the idea of, hey, we got hung up on this idea of like target focused, right? Everyone needs to be shooting the same target. Everyone needs to be target focused, target focused, target focused. And in reality, if everyone is shooting someone at the same time, to more or less degree, we'd prefer not to have 5 people shooting 5 different people. But if it's spread out a little bit, there can be more opportunity for better pressure in those scenarios, right? How many times have you been in a game or a match where it's like, man, we just cannot finish off this tank. Everyone's pouring damage into this Orisa, but she just barely is hanging on there because she's got double pocket from a BAP and an Ana, and she just is never gonna die, right? There's opportunities to create pressure in different ways. Target focus is not the be all end all. It's important at times. Some compositions rely more on it than others, dive compositions being one, but don't get too hung up on that. Second thing, in order to achieve this, right, if we want to create a situation where 5 people have pressure, they're creating pressure at the same time, we need a clear signal to go. When are we going? When are we creating pressure? Clear signal to go can come in one of two ways. Calls, right? We talked about who's calling the plans, who's calling the engagements, and triggers. A trigger is essentially just a call in advance, right? Say, hey, when they walk through the choke, we're going to speed boost onto them or we're going to dive them, right? Your trigger is when they walk through the choke. So when everyone sees the enemy team walk through the choke, boom, we just go. We don't even have to call it necessarily. We just go. Or hey, when our monkey jumps in, right? And then we're just all kind of waiting for our monkey to go in. We see him, boom, and everybody else follows, right? So hitting off that, right? If trying to create 5 people, pressuring at the same time, we're using clear signals to go. When should I, as an individual, be peeking, be going in, or using my cooldowns and ultimates in the course of the fight, right? And that's when we are ready to commit, right? When the team is ready to go in, or when the fight has started. Sometimes we don't get to dictate the pace, right? Our opponents have autonomy. They're gonna jump onto us at times. They're gonna start the fight first. But hey, when that fight's going, it is go time. Time to throw punches and use cooldowns, right? But until that time, if we're not ready to commit and the enemy hasn't started the fight, we need to be holding our major resources. We can't be standing in choke, getting our shield burned as Ryan or Sigma. We can't be getting our blinks and our recall forced as Tracer. We can't be using our yeeting off onanades and sleeps, right? When the fight is not about to happen, we need those resources for the actual fight. And then 2, on the clear signal to go, right? Sometimes it's just called. So a little bit of a visual example here of how timing can work, and especially in the context of target focus not being necessarily key or even being worse for us here. We're looking at, we're in the blue comp, right? We've gotten set up here. Say our Hanzo is looking to pressure out this Widow, right? If he goes in too early, if Hanzo goes in too early, what's going to happen? Or what could potentially happen? Reaper pushes Mei and solo Otzer. Possibly indeed. Some other statements. Widow could just leave, sure. Enemy team can peel for the Widow. Widow kills Hanzo. Zen sees and helps him. Yeah, the idea here, right? If the Hanzo's in too early and these guys are hanging back, our Zen, our Baptiste can pocket this Widow and make it an uneven fight, right? And then the Widow is totally just fine. Widow could always rotate out. If she does, that's okay. But mostly we're concerned with if their team doesn't have anything else to take up their attention, then they can pocket the Widow and win this duel on the flank here. On the flip side, consider 2 situations. Either A, our Hanzo is just late, or B, he went in early, the Widow got pocketed and he got forced out. So now he is backing up while our team is going in. Now what happens? If he's too late or is he's forced out because he went early, now it's essentially 4 versus 5, and this Widow has an incredibly fantastic angle on our team, creating tons of pressure on our team. So the situation we're looking for is this, right? Where the Hanzo is pressuring the Widow as our team tries to push in so that she can't just get free damage into the side of our team. So that's a basic illustration of how this idea of timing works. We're going to blaze through positioning real quick for 2 reasons. One, there's too many things that we could talk about with positioning. Again, we could do a whole series of clinics on positioning here. I'll drop a video actually for you in chat. That's just an incredibly great resource by Temporal, another Overwatch coach. I thought about breaking down some of those concepts, but again, I don't want to open up the fire hose too much. It'll be a great thing. It's worth your time for sure. It's only about 11 minutes long. But 2 main things I want you to know about positioning. Teams need to know 2 main things. The first and foremost is that if we're defending or attacking, we need to know, hey, where are we setting up pre-fight? Defenders, right, the setup pre-fight makes sense. As attacking, the question is a lot more about where are we going? Where are we rotating? Where are we pathing to, trying to get to in order to set up a good fight? And the second thing that's especially important is this idea that flanks and off angles most often are the positions that are going to influence the fight the most, creating big pressure, right? And we saw that a bit in the image. We'll go back to this example here to where in this situation, right, the Widow over here and the Hanzo over here, they're going to have a disproportionate impact on the fight. If our Hanzo runs it down main with the rest of our team, the Widow here on the off angle has immense pressure, right? Ryan cannot shield both her and the rest of their team. This is a ton of pressure coming onto our team. So how could we do this? How could we adjust things to make it better? Well, we could set up our own off angle, right? This would be a little bit better, let's say, if we had that Cassidy back than the Hanzo. But as long as the timing is decent, this position, this flank is really strong. This creates a ton of pressure on the red team, right? But you can see, just like we looked at in that last example, if timing is bad, good positions fail. Because, well, if you're in a good position, but you are on your own, right? You're not going to have a lot of success out there. So this is pretty good, right? Not bad, but we've still got the issue of this Widow over here. It'd be nice if we had our own flank and angle. So how can we make this even better? Any ideas? How could we make this even better? Wall Widow off, sure, not a bad idea, right? We could use that wall cooldown to cut off line of sight. It's a great idea. Moira for Baptiste, interesting. A little more survivability, maybe chuck a damage orb at that Widow, zone her out. Other thoughts? Bap shoots Widow from range, May walls her off, push up Reaper to Hanzo, Zen close, May wall Rhine, focus Widow, position under the Widowmaker, right? Avoid the LOS, speed boost in, then have Hanzo go for backline. Sure. Yeah, different ideas, right? One alternative that we could go for here is, okay, our Lucio speed boosts the front line in and then immediately jumps off, climbs, and goes and denies the Widow, right? Compare this image to the one we had a couple ago. The likelihood of success much higher in this kind of a setup than this one, right? And you guys list off some other great ideas with walls and other options for rotations. So think creatively, right, about how we can mitigate enemy pressure, how we can maximize our own pressure. Some basic positioning examples. This is actually an image from last year's clinic that I left in here just because I thought it illustrated the point well. This idea of, hey, angles, flanks, they create a lot of pressure. Which of these would you rather be up against if you were the red team, right? The setup on the right is a tough nut to crack. All right, quick kind of recap of where we've been with some of the Overwatch fundamentals here, right? Planning, timing, positioning, how these three things tie together. Again, if you are focused on one thing, go in order, right? Start with planning, work your way to timing, work your way to positioning. You'll get a lot of impact from these. And this is not just true of teams. You don't have to be thinking about this in a team environment. The planning piece obviously is easier in a team context, but timing, you can work on timing in your ranked games, right? If you're a support player, if you're a DPS player, if you're a tank, like pay attention to where your team is at. Are they ready to go in with me? Are they ready? When should I be saving my cooldowns? Are we actually fighting? Am I too early? Am I too late? Pay attention to those things. You can get good practice in your own time. All right. So how are you supposed to do all that, right? That's roughly the end of the water hose, the fire hose. How do we implement this, right? Focus on the big picture. Focus on the main things that stuck out to you as, okay, I think this is where I'm at as a player or where we're at with the team. I think we got to start at square one. We got to figure out our team comps, or hey, communication. Our communication could be a lot better. There's a lot of fluff of chit chat that is not helpful in game. We get distracted. We get frustrated. Um, we get caught up talking about extreme examples or fights that happened 2 fights ago, right? Discuss with your team, right? Get with your team. If you don't have a team, just discuss with, people you play with or whatever, or just do some self-contemplation. What is our next step? What's the main thing for us? And then thirdly, today's clinic, this was very much informational, and we'll get into a little bit of Q&A here in a little bit. This summer, we're doing a couple, what I'm going to call online elite training camps, where we will actually spend a little bit of time doing some informational stuff like this, but primarily we'll be doing gameplay. We'll be getting you in game, practicing these skills, communication, teaching them hands-on. So if that is something that is attractive to you, if you're interested in growing as a player and as a competitor, I would highly recommend checking those out. I'm going to drop a link here in the chat. We're doing these this summer. Again, these will be online. They'll be 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Would love to have some of you participate in that. I think it's a great opportunity if you're someone who is interested in, helping your team improving as a competitor. If you're someone who's interested in playing at the next level collegiately, this would be a great way to kickstart some of those skills. Yeah, discuss with your teams, focus on the big picture. These are great next steps. Will there be slides to follow as far as sending to us? I don't know if I'll be able to send the slides over or not, but we are recording the clinic, so I can send that off to you so you can review things back. I can probably get a copy of the slides off as well. So we've got a few minutes left yet here. If you have questions, go ahead and toss them in the chat, but we do have questions from people's registration that they submitted ahead of time. So we're going to talk about a few of those now as well. All right. Good set of questions. A couple first, just about collegiate esports in general, and a few Overwatch ones. Do I like Taco John's? It's okay. What would I need to do to get into college for esports? This is a great question. If you are interested in collegiate esports, first off, like I said at the start, collegiate esports is vast. There's a wide range of different programs, from extremely large to rather small, the different goals of it. The first thing I would advise you is focus on the college, not just the esports program, because you can find a college that has what you want from an academic standpoint, that probably has an esports program. Just do a little looking around. More and more esports programs are popping up, but focus on your high school grades, focus on your academics. Scholarships are there for esports, but for the vast majority of schools and teams, you will still get the most amount of money for your grades, not for your gaming skills. It's just the way of the world. It's the way college is probably always going to be. Secondly, focus on the skills we talked about today, primarily in the form of communication and teamwork. Being a good teammate is way more important to me and the kids that I recruit than if you're cracked at Overwatch. I can teach people through my experience how to become cracked at Overwatch. It's a lot harder for me to get you to the point of being a good teammate and a good communicator. So use the opportunities you have in high school to really work on those skills. How long does a regular collegiate Overwatch game last? So we play in the NACC. Most Overwatch matches regular season are best of 5. So you'll play anywhere from 3 to 5 games. For us, we have our players come in about an hour ahead of time to go through our warm up and pregame routine, talking some strategy, getting warmed up in game, going through some things. The match itself lasts, hour to an hour and a half on average. How are the teams set up by the players and the coaches? Depends on the program. Some programs are student-run clubs, but varsity programs like ours, I recruit and organize the teams. I decide who's on what rosters. Because I have experience coaching Overwatch, I'll influence some of the compositions, but I also do enjoy giving players opportunities to exercise autonomy and coach themselves and plan the strategies and the compositions. When your team is losing in a match hard, what are some ways you pull it back together? Excuse me. Communication is a big one here. Often I will even have our players, if we're in the middle of a match, when a map ends, we can't do this in the middle of a map, obviously, but when a map ends, we've got more maps to go, I'll have people stand up, get out of their chair, stretch for a minute, recenter, refocus us. Hey, the previous map, it's over. Focus up, keep our communication high. The number one thing I'd advise is focus hard on, all right, guys, just focus on communicating, playing the best that we can. Sometimes you will lose matches hard. Sometimes you'll just come against somebody who is straight up better or who has a great strategy that you just don't know how to deal with right now. And that is just the way of life. But keep your communication high, focus on good team trust and team encouragement, and that's the way to hang in there. But nothing will cause you to crumble faster than going toxic, getting on one another's nerves, and just throwing in the towel and saying nothing. During practice, we scrim. Sometimes one team gets rolled, gets personal, causes tension. Any ways to practice effectively that can avoid this? Very similarly to what I just said, this is just part of life. Sometimes you're going to get rolled. Don't take it personally. Remember what I said at the beginning. The goal of practice is not to win maps. You can lose every map and have a great practice full of growth. The goals, winning needs to be, did we accomplish our goal? Not did we win the map? That needs to be the goal. Okay, I'm going to pause with the pre-registration questions for a minute, go through a few questions that just came in. Any way to apply this stuff to solo queue? Absolutely. I talked about this a little bit with the timing, or even like how many heroes you play in practice. Like that's primarily solo queue. Like that's your workout, right? That's your weight training. That's your building up muscle memory. Practice just a handful of heroes in solo queue. Timing is a great solo queue. Positioning is a great solo queue. Planning obviously is a little bit trickier, but work your timing, work your positioning. When should you move from easy characters to harder characters? That's a great question. Depends on how seriously you take your training and your practice. I would try to learn heroes that are fun for you. You do it in an effective way. Every time when I first started playing Overwatch, when I wanted to learn a new hero, players so often neglect information. Watch YouTube guides, watch coaching sessions on YouTube of one-on-one VOD reviews of my hero. Talk to other players who have played this or who know the game better. If you're someone who's passionate about learning, like you can start picking up complex heroes. Just learn them. Don't just pick them up and try to wing it. Best ultimate combos. Honestly, that's a little bit too broad to address in this format. Just with how many different heroes and characters there are. Grab Dragon is still good. Nano Blade is still good. There's two for you. Is there an accurate listing of characters that counteract other characters? Great question. In Overwatch is not so much a game of hard counters, to be honest. Part of why compositions are built the way they are is to minimize the impact of counter picks. In Overwatch 2, with only one tank, counter picking is a little bit more effective, especially in the tank role. But I would spend a little more. I wouldn't worry too much about counter picking, to be honest. I would spend more time. You'll get more bang for your buck focusing on the core fundamental skills of like planning and timing than on pure counter picking. There might be some lists and ideas out there of counter picking. It's never been something I've been very bought into or a fan of or worried about. Because again, you just can't have players that are competent and extremely comfortable on every single hero in the game. So play what's good for you and your players are strong at, and I think that's the best way to do it. Any organizational tips for making game plans you like to use? That's a good question. Or tools. Do you mean like in-game plans, like fight plans, like the like we talked about with default playstyle, things like that? Expand on that for me if you can. But as far as tools, again, I've done a lot of just watching other teams play, a lot of watching coaching content from people like Spilo and Temporal and IOStux, learning about the game. How long should individual/team practice sessions be? Great question. As long as you can stay focused is the broad answer, right? Sometimes you might have a really intense scrimmage and about an hour and a half, hour to an hour and a half, you've been playing so hard and really tough scrim partner, where it's just hard to stay focused. And so you might need to be done. Other times, if the matches are less intense, you can maybe go for 2 to 3 hours and still stay focused. But the ability to maintain focus is of main importance. I think beyond 3 hours, you really start to get diminishing returns. I think for teams, 2 hours is a good sweet spot, but really try to keep focus high for as long as you can. Should I consider playing a different character in the long run if they get hard nerfed? It's hard to say because heroes come in and out with patch notes. Yeah, I always emphasize, hey, play what is fun for you. Again, if you're someone who's really focused at, like, if you're a GM player and you're hoping to play top collegiate or semi-professional or whatever, you'll have to start learning meta heroes, things like that. But if you're at most other ranks and you're just playing, if you're playing high school or you're playing most collegiate, pick a few heroes that you really enjoy, because the enjoyment factor is important, because if you enjoy it, it's easier to train, it's easier to practice. If you're trying to force yourself to learn heroes you don't like, you'll just lose your enjoyment of the game. It's hard to practice and be motivated. Yeah, fight plans. Fight plans, yeah, that's a good question. I would honestly, the best thing for fight plans, look up Spilo coaching videos, specifically around fight planning, or a collaboration he did with Egoist Cat. There's no great perfect tools. That's just kind of a bit of learning and trial and error. But just finding coaching content that can help you understand the game a bit more will help with that. But the basics, hey, what are we doing, where, and when? Like I said, don't worry too much about quality at this point. It's just having the basic plan together and executing it effectively is going to be the way to go. But if you want to learn how to understand the game, watching coaching content by good coaches, there are a lot of not so great coaches out there. Spilo and Temporal, excellent. IOStuck's excellent. They're good places to start. They'll help you learn things about the game. All right, couple more. I know we're about at 5 o'clock. I'm going to blaze through just the last few slide questions we had. This is another great one. Main difference between scrim and rank mentality. Overall, I would say your mindset shouldn't be awfully different from thinking you can get value from the time and how seriously you take it. It's more about where's your emphasis. When you're in scrims, emphasizing planning is great. In ranked and I wouldn't worry as much about planning, but I would still have goals. I would still try to stay high focus on those goals, work on timing, work on positioning. In ranked, you're still worried a little bit about what your team is doing in terms of how it impacts how you should be timing, right? And how you should position. But outside of that, don't worry about your team. Just practice your goals, try to improve and work better. Don't even worry about winning too much. Just focus on improvement. In scrims, you're going to focus a little bit more on planning and communication. That's great. But outside of that, there shouldn't be a huge difference in the mentality. The mentality for both should be, how do I improve in this context? What is my goal for improvement in this context? This is a good one. No matter what I do or how well I play, if one of my teammates is not on par with the enemy team, the match is lost. I just go on losing streaks, can't escape. Is there any advice? Similarly to the previous question, focus on your improvement. You'll run into games that just are not winnable. Don't worry about it. You'll run into games that are not losable. You're going to get some free wins. You're going to get some unturnable losses. But if you are focused on your goals of improving as a player, then in the long run, you'll have that 60% of matches that you can influence. All you need is a 55% win rate to climb. You don't need a 90% win rate. You don't need a 70% win rate. Win streaks, loss streaks, they happen. Just try not to worry about it. Just stay focused on your goals and improvement. Some games just aren't winnable, and that's okay. All right, that is most of the questions we had from registration. If yours, there were a few that were submitted that we didn't quite have time for all, so I will and should be looping around to those for you. If you don't hear from me, shoot me an email with that question again, and I'll try to get you an answer. But thank you for being here today. Again, going from focus on the big picture, discuss next steps with your team, or do some reflection with yourself if you're solo. Consider checking out our summer camps. Would love to dive into more time with you, get to see you in game and help you grow a bit more as a team, as players. Where can we find the recording? I will upload the clinic to YouTube, and I will email out a recording of the clinic to the email that you submitted when you registered. If you did not get an email from me. If you signed up with a school email that is maybe blocked by your school districts, something like that, shoot me an email. I'll just toss my email here. You can shoot me an email and I will get you that link, or ask your coach to reach out to me and I can get the link to you. The clinic might not go up for a few days yet. So if you haven't heard from me by the end of this week or by next week, Monday, follow up and I'll get that to you. So yeah, thanks for coming. Hope you all enjoyed it. I know it was a bit of a lot of talking. I love teaching things, but it's a lot of information to take in. So hope you found something useful from today. Good luck in the rest of your seasons. If you have follow-up questions, again, feel free to reach out and we'll hopefully see you this summer. Otherwise, keep an eye out for next year's clinic. Have a good one, everybody.